The market buzzed with voices and footsteps, dust rising in little clouds beneath woven sandals. Traders called out over piles of yam, dried fish, and woven baskets. The sun was at its highest, painting the sky in a harsh, white-blue heat. Nalia stood near the edge of the fabric stall, her arms folded across her chest, a half-filled basket of tomatoes and cassava leaves at her feet. She had just handed over coins to the cloth seller when she noticed Jabari standing by the well, bending toward a woman she had never seen before. The woman looked nothing like anyone from their village. Her dress was stained but of fine weave, something richer than what women here wore. Her skin was a warm bronze shade, glowing beneath the sun, and her features, soft lips, a high brow, long lashes, were unsettlingly perfect. She seemed too polished for their dusty roads and simple lives. Nalia's stomach turned slightly as she watched her husband tilt his head with concern. The woman was holding her arm as though injured, her eyes wide and pleading. Jabari nodded quickly, placing his hand lightly on her back to guide her away from the crowd. Nalia didn't move but watched with growing tension. Her husband whispered something to the stranger and then glanced toward her, catching Nalia's gaze before turning away too quickly. When they arrived home, Nalia was still sweeping the kitchen hut. Jabari's voice rang out before he even entered. "Nalia, we have a visitor. She's been through something terrible." The woman followed just behind him, her steps uncertain, but her eyes darting everywhere. She smiled, small and sweet. "Please, I do not mean to intrude. I was only looking for a place to rest for a night or two." Jabari filled in the story, how he found her near the market well, dizzy from heat and hunger, saying she'd walked from the next village after escaping a violent home. She had no family, no destination, and no strength to go further. He had offered her food and water, and she'd gratefully accepted. Nalia pressed her lips together, her eyes fixed on the woman's necklace, a thin silver chain, glinting with a pendant shaped like a coiled serpent. The detail was sharp, its eyes tiny red stones, its mouth slightly open as though hissing. It stirred something in her, a vague discomfort, a memory like smoke just out of reach. She had seen it somewhere. Not in the market, not in town. In a dream maybe. No, a nightmare. One that left her waking with her heart pounding and the taste of blood in her mouth. But she said nothing. Instead, she forced a quiet nod and brought a stool from the corner. "Sit," she said flatly. "You look like you need rest." Zara, she had said her name was Zara, lowered herself gently onto the stool and offered a fragile smile. "Thank you, sister. You are kind. I won't be a burden." Jabari beamed with relief, rubbing the back of his neck like a boy who had done something noble. "She'll stay in the back hut for now, just until she gains strength." Nalia gave a slow blink. That was her late aunt's hut. No one had stayed there since the funeral rites. She had just begun using it to dry herbs. But she held her tongue. Instead, she asked, "Do you have anything with you? Any bundle? A wrapper?" Zara shook her head. "Only what I wear." "How did you make it this far with nothing?" Nalia asked more sharply than she meant. Zara looked down at her hands. "When a man raises a machete at your back, you don't think to pack." The silence that followed was heavy. Jabari gave Nalia a glance of disappointment before ushering Zara toward the back hut. Nalia watched them go, her heart torn between compassion and suspicion. Later that evening, after dinner had been served and eaten mostly in silence, Nalia stood outside, grinding millet under the orange glow of twilight. She could see the hut through the clearing, its door ajar, Zara's silhouette moving slowly inside. The necklace glinted again, catching the last sunlight like a snake watching through tall grass. Jabari came and stood beside her, picking at a piece of mango. "She's been through a lot," he said softly. "So have many," Nalia replied, not looking at him. "She needs us. Just for a few days. We don't even know her. We know she needs help." Nalia didn't argue further. What was the point? Jabari's heart had always been soft, always quick to act before weighing stone from shadow. But still, she had never seen him this eager to please a stranger. There was something in the way he looked at Zara. Admiration? Curiosity? Pity? Or something less noble? That night, as they lay on their mat, Nalia faced the wall while Jabari drifted to sleep. She couldn't close her eyes. Every time she tried, the serpent from Zara's necklace slithered behind her eyelids. She saw it in that same strange place she had seen in the dream, a field of burnt trees, a shallow grave, a figure without a face. She turned over and looked at Jabari's sleeping profile. His chest rose and fell, peaceful, unaware. Nalia wrapped her arms around herself and stared through the tiny gap in their hut's wall, out toward the darkness where the guest slept. Something in her chest whispered, "Watch her." She didn't know why, but she would. By the second morning, Zara moved through the compound like she had always belonged. Her voice floated like honey through the air, soft and measured, filled with laughter even when she spoke of hard things. She woke before dawn to sweep the compound, carried water from the stream, and prepared breakfast before Nalia had even unwrapped the cooking stones. She sang unfamiliar lullabies in a language that seemed half sung, half chanted, and when the neighbors passed by, they smiled and called her well-mannered and blessed with light hands. Nalia watched all of it with a tight jaw. She never asked to be relieved of her duties, but Zara moved so quickly, so sweetly, there was little left for her to do by the time she rose. Jabari, meanwhile, had taken to sitting outside more than usual, especially in the evenings, always just outside Zara's hut. Sometimes he helped her shell groundnuts. Sometimes he merely listened as she spoke in low, mysterious tones. Nalia would step out to find him laughing softly, or just watching Zara as she swept or combed her hair under the shade of the mango tree. At first she told herself it was harmless. Maybe he pitied the girl. Maybe her presence stirred his protector's instinct. But it was the way he stopped touching Nalia's back when he passed. The way he paused before answering her questions. The way he now spoke to her as if she were a neighbor, not a wife. One evening, as the shadows lengthened across the compound and chickens clucked themselves into sleep, Nalia sat combing her daughter Asha's hair. The girl was fidgety, eyes darting toward Zara, who sat humming to herself near the fire, stirring a pot of stew with long, graceful movements. "Mama," Asha whispered, "she sings to the trees." "What?" "In the morning before you wake. She stands near the mango tree and sings with no words." Nalia's fingers froze. "She said the tree listens better than people do," Asha added matter-of-factly. The stew smelled good. Too good. Rich and unfamiliar, with spices Nalia hadn't seen in their stores. Zara claimed to use only what she found in the kitchen hut, but the scent was layered, peppery, sweet, and something else. Something faintly metallic. Nalia forced herself to eat that night, though each spoonful felt heavier than the last. Later that week, two of the older neighbor women visited and stayed for tea. They were kind but cautious, the way village women often are when their tongues want to say more than their mouths will allow. "Your guest is beautiful," one said, swirling her tea. "Too beautiful," added the other, not hiding her stare. "She has a smile like a secret." Nalia didn't respond. She noticed they didn't take a second cup. By the next day, rumors had begun to slip through the village like water seeping through cracked pots. "She walks without sound," someone whispered. "Never sweats, not even in the sun," said another. "She doesn't blink," claimed an old man near the well. "When she looks at you, it's like being red." And then someone said it outright, "Shadows walk with beauty." It was an old village phrase, meant to describe people whose grace was unnatural, who drew eyes and luck and death in equal measure. That night, while clearing dried cassava peels near the kitchen, Nalia found something tucked beneath the bamboo shelf. A doll. Her daughter's. But broken. The cloth arms were torn, and the small wooden face had scratches across both eyes, as if clawed out with sharp fingernails. Nalia called for Asha, heart tight in her chest. "Why is your doll like this?" Asha looked at it, then at the ground. She fidgeted with her fingers. "I buried it," she whispered. "Why would you do that?" "The lady told me to. She said it's the way to protect dreams. She said if I close its eyes, the bad things won't find me at night." Nalia's throat dried. "She said it works best when you bury it behind your mama's hut." Zara was sweeping again by the fire, smiling faintly as if she heard nothing, though the distance between them was wide enough for secrets. Nalia took the doll and turned it over. The stitching on the back had come loose. Something small and black had been tucked inside, dried leaves and what looked like ash. Her fingers trembled. This was not a child's game. This was something else. That night she didn't sleep. Jabari returned late from the meeting house, and she asked him if he'd noticed Asha acting strange. He only shrugged. "She's a child. Maybe she's jealous of the attention." Nalia wanted to scream. Instead, she lay beside him in silence, listening to his breathing as it deepened. Across the compound she could still see the faint glow of a lantern in Zara's hut. Her silhouette passed once in front of the curtain. She was humming again, slowly, like a lullaby for something ancient and waiting. Nalia clutched the broken doll to her chest and stared at the ceiling until dawn. The morning was gray with heavy clouds, and a thick stillness settled over the village like a waiting breath. Nalia wrapped her headscarf tightly, tucked the broken doll into a calabash, and walked past the market without stopping. Her feet carried her toward the outer fields, where the huts grew older and farther apart, and where people spoke more with plants than with people. The path to Mama Dodo's compound curved between termite-eaten trees and fields left fallow. Even the wind seemed to move slower here. Mama Dodo's home sat crouched beneath a cluster of fig trees, roof heavy with moss, walls layered in decades of smoke and incense. Strange feathers hung above the doorframe, and a string of dried orange peels lined the windows. Chickens with missing eyes and twisted toes wandered the yard like dream fragments. Nalia paused at the entrance, heart pounding. She had not come here in years. The last time was before Asha was born, when she had feared she could not carry a child. Mama Dodo had given her bitter roots to chew and a wordless prayer whispered into her belly. And it had worked. She knocked 3 times. Inside a voice creaked, "Come in, daughter of earth." The room was dark but smelled of crushed herbs, smoked wood and something deeper, metallic, old and sharp. Mama Dodo sat curled like a question mark near the center, wrapped in layers of brown and blue. Her eyes were milky with age but they blinked with a strange alertness. "I felt you walking," she said, not looking up. "Your heart is carrying too much noise." Nalia knelt and placed the calabash on the mat before her. "Mama, I need to understand something. There's a woman staying at our home. She says she's alone in danger but—" Mama Dodo lifted a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "Tell me her name." Nalia hesitated. Her voice dropped. "Zara." A silence spread across the room like ink in water. Mama Dodo's hands, which had been busy grinding something in a wooden bowl, froze. "Zara," she said softly, "that name is a window? Not a name. What does that mean?" The old woman finally turned her eyes to Nalia. "It is not a name people give their children. It is a name spirits give themselves." Nalia's mouth went dry. She looked at the doll still wrapped in cloth. "She gave my daughter this," she whispered. "Told her to bury it. Told her to close its eyes to protect her dreams." Mama Dodo reached out and took the doll, turning it over with fingers that looked like gnarled roots. She sniffed it, opened the cloth back and nodded. "This is not play," she said. "This is binding. It closes the soul to protection. Makes the child's spirit quiet so it cannot scream when danger is near." Nalia's hands trembled. "What is she?" Mama Dodo's eyes narrowed. "Some women are born from wombs. Some are born from curses. That one comes dressed in silk but walks barefoot through graves." Nalia tried to swallow but her throat tightened. "She is not here for food. Or sleep. She is here to be chosen. To be loved. To be invited. And once she is welcomed she does not leave. Unless something is given in her place." Nalia stood abruptly. "I need to get her out of my house." Mama Dodo shook her head slowly. "No. That is not how it works. You do not throw fire from your roof, you quench it with earth. And sometimes with your own hands." She reached behind her into a leather pouch and drew out a small woven satchel, tied with black twine. "This is ash from burned grave cloths and salt from the river Callow where spirits do not drink. Burn it at the place of choosing, at the place your husband looks at her instead of you." Nalia took the pouch like it might bite her. "If he chooses her," Mama Dodo said, "burn it. Blood will answer blood. That which wears beauty will show bone. That which walks will stumble. And if he doesn't choose her?" The old woman smiled grimly. "Then bury the pouch beneath a tree and say nothing. Either way you must watch. Not with your eyes. With your knowing." Nalia left the hut feeling colder than when she entered. The wind picked up now, curling around her like invisible fingers. The pouch felt heavy in her wrapper, heavier than the calabash had. She walked fast, then slower as doubt crept in. Could this really be true? Zara had spoken gently. She had helped cook and sweep. She had offered smiles, soft thanks, laughter. And yet, those eyes that seemed to glow at dusk. The doll with its face carved out. Jabari's distant voice. The hum in the night. By the time she returned to the compound, Asha was napping, and Jabari was repairing the goat pen. Zara was washing cassava by the stream, her dress clinging to her body, her hair catching sunlight like gold threads. She turned and smiled when she saw Nalia, and something in her expression flickered, only for a second, but enough. Nalia clutched the pouch tighter in her fist, heart whispering a prayer she didn't know she remembered. Whether it was fear or belief she felt more she couldn't tell. But she did know one thing. She would watch. It was just after the midday meal when Jabari told her. The sun was high, the children chasing goats through the dust, and the scent of burnt yams still clung to the air. Nalia was washing cassava skins behind the kitchen hut when he called her name. His voice sounded strange, firm, practiced as though he had said the words many times before in his head. She wiped her hands on her wrapper and turned, water dripping from her fingers. He was standing with his arms crossed, not looking at her directly. "We need to talk," he said. Her heart tightened. She nodded once, already knowing. He took a deep breath. "I've made a decision, sir. I want to take her as my second wife." The bowl in her hands slipped, landing with a hollow sound in the dirt. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She stared at him, waiting for a grin, a chuckle, something that would make this a joke. But there was nothing on his face but resolve. "You what?" she asked finally, voice dry. "I've spoken to her," he said, still not meeting her gaze. "She has no family. No one. She's been through pain and yet she brings peace. She deserves a home. And I've come to care for her deeply." Nalia's head spun. "You've come to care for her? In 2 weeks. It's not about time. Sometimes hearts know faster than clocks can count." She laughed, sharp, pained. "Is this love, or is it lust dressed as mercy?" Jabari stepped back slightly. "Don't insult her." "I'm insulting you, Jabari," she snapped. "You bring a woman into our home. You let her sit at our fire, use my pots, smile at our child, and now you want to make her my co-wife. She's not your enemy, Nalia. Don't let bitterness twist this." "Oh, so I'm bitter now?" Her voice shook with anger. "Because I ask questions? Because I see what you refuse to? That woman came from nowhere, with nothing, and suddenly she's the heartbeat of our home. She's kind," he said quietly. "She listens to me. She looks at me like I matter." That cut deeper than any blade. Nalia took a step back, hand pressed to her chest. "I've always looked at you like you mattered," she whispered. "But maybe you stopped seeing it." He turned away then, rubbing his face with his hand. "I'm not trying to hurt you." "But you are," she replied. "You already have." He didn't respond. Just walked off toward the edge of the compound, leaving her standing with cassava water dripping down her legs and her heart heavy as stone. That evening, silence sat between them like a third presence. Zara moved gracefully between the rooms, lighting lanterns, humming softly. Jabari sat on the stool near the fire, pretending to repair a gourd basket, but his hands were still. Nalia watched him from the shadows, a thousand thoughts twisting inside her. She barely touched her food. Asha kept glancing between her parents with wide, uncertain eyes. After dinner, Nalia feigned sleep, waiting for the compound to grow quiet. When Jabari finally rolled over, sighing into slumber, she rose and wrapped herself in a shawl. Outside, the moon floated full and pale above the trees. The wind whispered through the plantain leaves. She moved carefully through the yard, ears alert. A faint rustle drew her attention toward the far end of the compound, near the abandoned storage hut. There, Zara walked barefoot in the dust, her white wrapper glowing faintly in the moonlight. Her hair hung loose down her back, and her hands moved rhythmically in the air, fingers stirring as if weaving something unseen. She knelt suddenly, touching the ground, and leaned forward to whisper into the earth. Nalia crouched low behind a pile of firewood, watching with chilled skin. Zara's lips moved, but the words didn't carry, only fragments like breath breaking apart. Then Zara reached into the earth, pulling up a small wrapped bundle. She stroked it once, then whispered again. Her eyes closed, her body swayed. For a moment, Nalia felt like she was watching something ancient, older than their village, older than prayer. Zara buried the bundle again and stood, brushing dirt from her knees. She turned toward the huts, and Nalia ducked lower, holding her breath until Zara passed. She did not look back. She did not smile. Nalia waited another long minute before rising and returning to her room. She crawled onto the mat beside Jabari, her heart thudding like a drum. He stirred but did not wake. She stared at the roof, too tense to close her eyes. Just before dawn, a scream sliced through the compound. Nalia bolted upright. "Asha!" She ran, bare feet slapping the ground, into her daughter's room. The girl sat up in bed, eyes wild with fear, tears streaking her cheeks. "What is it?" Nalia asked, pulling her close. Asha shook her head violently. She came into my room." "Who?" "The lady." Nalia felt a cold coil around her spine. "Zara?" Asha nodded. She stood there. But her eyes, Mama, her eyes were gone. The moon looked in and her face had no eyes. Nalia held her tighter. "Sure, it's all right. I'm here." "No." Asha sobbed. "She told me to be quiet. That if I screamed, the night would come into my mouth." Nalia felt a rage rise, sharp and deep. She kissed her daughter's forehead, whispering a prayer into her braids. Outside, the first rooster crowed. Nalia stood and looked toward Zara's hut. The curtains swayed gently in the breeze. This was not just a woman. And it was not just love. Something had entered her home, and it had no intention of leaving without taking something in return. It began slowly, like a sickness that doesn't show until it's too late. First, it was the chickens. Not all at once, not in a way that raised alarms. Just one missing here, another gone the next morning. Feathers scattered near the mango tree. A trail of blood leading nowhere. At first, they blamed wild dogs or greedy boys. But even the goats seemed to shy away from the area near Zara's hut. Then the child went missing. It was a clear afternoon. The sky was wide and blue, the air thick with the scent of ripening guava. Children were playing near the well as they always did, splashing their feet, tossing stones to see whose would make the biggest splash. The laughter echoed through the trees until suddenly it stopped. One child, a boy no older than 6, slipped and disappeared into the well. By the time the villagers pulled him out, he was lifeless. Not a mark on him. Just his lips, darkened, his eyes wide and staring like they had seen something that couldn't be described. The mourning began immediately. The boy's mother tore her wrapper, wailing into the sky. Old women spat into the dust, whispering prayers to keep evil from entering their homes. A quiet fear spread like fire through dry grass. And then, as if death had not had its fill, one of the elders was found lifeless on his mat the next morning. He had been healthy the night before, eating roasted yams, laughing with his grandsons. But now he lay cold, with dried blood trailing from his nostrils and eyes open to the thatched roof. The healer who examined him found no cause. His breath just left him, she said, puzzled. As if something came to collect it in the night. Nalia listened to the village whispering. She felt it too, the tension that clung to the air, the heaviness in her bones. Mama Dodo's warning beat behind her eyes. Blood will answer blood. But the strangest thing of all was how Zara never looked surprised. When they told her of the child's death, she didn't cry or gasp. She only blinked slowly and murmured, "The spirits are not used to me yet. They are troubled by new presence." Later, when the elder was found dead, she said the same thing. Sometimes old spirits test new ones. It will pass. The villagers began to look at her with mixed awe and fear. Some said she brought misfortune. Others claimed she was the only one strong enough to survive it. Children avoided her gaze. Old women clutched charms when she walked by. But no one spoke directly. No one challenged her. Except Nalia. She watched Zara with eyes sharpened by grief and betrayal. The way she glided across the compound like she belonged there. The way she touched Jabari's arm in passing, like a wife claiming what was hers. Then came the final insult. One morning, Nalia returned from the stream with a full pot on her head and stopped in her tracks. There, in the middle of the yard, stood Zara, wearing her wrapper. The one her mother had gifted her on her wedding day. Indigo dyed, hand-stitched, worn only on special occasions. Zara had tied it perfectly, matching it with the brass bangles Nalia kept in her wooden box. Nalia's voice cracked as she spoke. "That is mine." Zara looked at her, slow and calm as if the accusation was unexpected. "It was in the box. I thought it wasn't being used. You went through my things? I only wanted to feel beautiful." Before Nalia could answer, Jabari stepped into the yard. He looked from Nalia to Zara, and instead of correcting Zara, instead of asking why she had taken things not hers, he simply said, "Let her be. It's just cloth." "Just cloth?" Nalia whispered. "My mother's hands dyed that wrapper. You know that." Zara said nothing, but her lips twitched, something too small to be called a smile, too cruel to be called an apology. The next day, during the village gathering by the council tree, Nalia tried to speak. She told the elders what she had seen, about the doll, the chanting, the bundle in the ground. But Jabari stood, loud and unbending, and shamed her in front of everyone. "You twist stories out of jealousy," he said, his voice sharp. "This is not the Nalia I married. This is bitterness talking." The crowd murmured. Some nodded in agreement, others looked away. Nalia stood still, her dignity unraveling like frayed rope. Zara sat quietly beside Jabari, her hands folded, her eyes lowered. But Nalia saw it, just for a second, a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. She walked home alone, her footsteps echoing like questions. That night she lit no fire, ate no food. She sat on her mat in silence, her hands gripping the saltash pouch Mama Dodo had given her. Something had broken. In her home. In her heart. In the village. And Zara was at the center of it all. The moon hung low and swollen, casting a pale glow over the sleeping compound. The sounds of frogs croaked lazily from the riverbank, and the wind carried with it the soft rustle of leaves, a lullaby for those who slept easily. But Nalia did not sleep. She lay with her eyes open, waiting, heart pressed tight beneath her ribs. She had been watching for days, waiting for the moment Zara would slip from her hut as she had done before. And tonight it came. Just past midnight, Nalia heard the soft creak of bamboo, the gentle shift of a curtain against the wind. She rose slowly, noiselessly, feet bare on the cool ground. Peering from the shadows of her hut, she saw Zara gliding silently across the compound, white wrapper clinging to her form, hair loose around her shoulders. She moved past the sleeping goats, past the ashes of the evening fire, and disappeared behind the old tree that stood at the edge of the compound, the tree that hadn't borne fruit in years, its bark blackened from lightning, its roots twisted like clenched fists. Nalia waited a breath, then followed. She crept carefully, each footstep placed like a dancer on broken glass. The tree loomed ahead, and there, half hidden in moonlight, Zara knelt beside its roots, hands moving in a deliberate, intimate rhythm. She was speaking softly, not chanting but whispering. Her voice was low, full of yearning, like she was speaking to someone deep below the ground. Nalia crouched behind a clay water drum, barely breathing. She watched as Zara lifted a small bundle from her wrapper, wrapped in something tattered and dark. She placed it carefully in a shallow hole between the roots, covering it with both palms pressed flat like a prayer. Then she stood, brushed her knees, and walked slowly back toward the compound, as if nothing in the world needed hiding. Nalia waited until she was sure Zara was gone, then darted forward. The tree loomed tall, but she did not tremble. Her hands dug into the earth quickly, fingers biting into the soil. Just beneath the surface, her fingers scraped cloth. She pulled out a small bundle, wrapped in old rotting fabric. It smelled sour and sharp, like fermented blood and something older. Her stomach turned, but she forced herself to undo the knot. The cloth unfolded with a soft crackle, and inside she found a curved piece of animal bone stained black, and worse, a cluster of human teeth strung together with red thread. She dropped the bundle, stumbled back, then knelt again. Her heart raced, but not with fear. With rage. This was not grief. This was not healing. This was power stolen and twisted. This was not the act of a guest or even a rival. Zara was something else entirely. She didn't wait for dawn. She wrapped the bundle tightly in layers of banana leaf, tied it with string, and left the compound under cover of darkness. Her feet carried her swiftly through the bush, past the fields and toward the edge of the village. By the time the sky began to stain with hints of pink, she was at Mama Dodo's door. She knocked once, twice, 3 times. The old woman opened the door already dressed. She had been expecting her. Nalia didn't speak. She simply held out the bundle. Mama Dodo took it, unwrapped it slowly, eyes narrowing. When the teeth emerged, she did not flinch. When the bone fell into her palm, she nodded grimly. "She's no longer hiding it," Nalia whispered. "No," Mama Dodo said. "Because she believes she's already won." "What is it?" The old woman stepped back inside and gestured for Nalia to follow. The air inside was thick with smoke and the smell of crushed herbs. Mama Dodo placed the bundle on a woven mat, sprinkled a fine red powder over it and began to chant. The powder sparked briefly, then hissed. The teeth turned slightly as if moving on their own. The bone trembled. Nalia stepped back. "She is not a woman, Nalia," Mama Dodo said, voice low and filled with weight. "She's a vessel. A body borrowed by something that waits between worlds. Something old." Nalia felt the ground shift under her feet. "She carries hunger. She offers sweetness only to those she wants to claim. And she has marked your home, your husband, your child." Nalia sank onto a low stool, her body suddenly heavy. "Then what do I do? How do I stop it?" Mama Dodo placed the bundle into a clay pot and sealed it with wax. "You do what must be done when fire enters a house. You smother it with truth. And you do it before it consumes everything." "She's already taken Jabari," Nalia whispered. "No," Mama Dodo said. "She's enthralled him. But there is still time. He has not yet offered blood. But he will. So, unless you act." Nalia stared at the pot on the mat. Her stomach coiled with dread. She had thought she was fighting for her marriage. For her dignity. She had not known she was fighting for her soul. For her daughter's life. For the breath of everyone who lived beneath that roof. "She must be revealed," Mama Dodo said. "In front of him. In the place he chose her. Only then will her skin betray her." Nalia nodded, slow but certain. She would no longer wait. She would no longer beg. If Zara was a vessel, then Nalia would be the blade that shattered it. The evening air was heavy, hanging low over the village like breath caught in a throat. Nalia returned from Mama Dodo's hut with the saltash pouch clutched tightly in her hand, its string cutting faint lines into her palm. The old woman's words echoed in her ears, "Burn it where he chose her. In the center of your fire. If truth lives in you, the lie will crack." The sun had barely dipped beyond the hills when Zara began preparing dinner, her movements as graceful as ever. She hummed softly, slicing vegetables with a curved blade that shimmered unnaturally in the firelight. Nalia watched her from the doorway of the kitchen hut, her breath shallow, her heart thrumming a war drum beat. Inside her wrapper was the clay bowl Mama Dodo had given her, lined with dry banana leaf and marked with red earth. She had already placed the cursed bundle, the teeth, the bone, the rot-wrapped cloth, at its center. The saltash pouch rested on top, still sealed. The ritual had to be done with intention. She could not waver. Jabari was down by the goat pen patching the fence. Asha had been sent to her aunt's for the night. Nalia had made sure of that. She would not allow her daughter to witness what truth might crawl out of the fire. She stepped into the center of the compound and knelt slowly, placing the bowl on the hard-packed ground. The same place where Jabari had first laughed with Zara. The same place where his eyes had changed. This was where the choosing happened, and it would be where the truth was born. She took a small coal from the kitchen fire, whispered the old words Mama Dodo had taught her, and lit the edge of the pouch. The salt crackled. The ash turned instantly blue. A strange, cold flame leapt up, not orange but icy sapphire, flickering against the evening shadows. Wind rose, sudden and fierce. It circled the compound like a hunting thing, lifting leaves, scattering dust. The goats began to bleat. The fire in the bowl twisted, rose higher, spinning in a strange column. And then, it screamed. Not like a flame. Not like wind. But like something alive inside the fire. Zara dropped her knife with a clatter. Her humming stopped. Nalia kept chanting, her voice trembling but firm. The blue fire danced in her eyes. The bundle inside hissed, popped, and burst, and in that instant Zara crumpled to the ground. Jabari heard the crash and came running. He found Nalia kneeling in front of the fire, arms raised, the air thick with smoke and chants and strange wind. Zara writhed on the dirt behind her, clutching her face. "What are you doing?" he shouted. Nalia didn't stop. Her voice rose louder. The flame howled. He rushed forward and grabbed her arm. "Stop it. You're killing her." She turned to him, her eyes wet and wild. "I'm saving you." He slapped her hard across the cheek. The sound cracked through the wind. Nalia stumbled sideways, gasping. The chant faltered. The fire dimmed, flickering. Zara, still collapsed, slowly lifted her face and smiled. Her skin was flickering, there was no other word for it. Like moonlight on shattered glass. For a second Nalia saw through her. A hollow face. A shadow curled beneath bone. Then it smoothed again, the illusion snapping back into place like stretched cloth. Zara's eyes gleamed like mirrors, reflecting everything and revealing nothing. "You've chosen your blood," she said softly, still lying on the ground. "And now your fire belongs to me." Jabari froze. The smile on Zara's face should have comforted him. But it didn't. Not anymore. He looked down at his wife, her cheek red from his hand, her eyes full of betrayal and grief. "What did you do?" he whispered. But Nalia said nothing. She rose slowly, cradling the bruised side of her face. Zara sat upright, graceful even in collapse. Her wrapper was untouched, not a speck of ash on her. But her shadow behind her flickered against the firelight, twisting into a shape no human should cast. Jabari's hands dropped to his sides. Nalia walked away without looking back. Not to him. Not to Zara. She had shown the truth. Whether he saw it or not was now up to him. But the choice had been made. And blood always remembers who chose it. The forest stood tall and breathless, thick with tangled roots and the weight of ancient things. Its trees pressed close like sentries, their trunks veined with moss, their leaves whispering secrets only the wind could carry. The sun barely touched the ground here, and what little light broke through fell in slanted beams like slivers of judgment. This was no place for walking. Not for men. Not for truth. But Jabari followed her anyway. Zara had come to him just before dawn, her voice as soft as dew on dry grass. "Come with me," she had whispered. "I want to show you where I come from. Where love is not tested, only given." He had asked nothing. Said nothing. Just packed a water gourd and followed. The villagers watched them go in silence, some curious, others cautious. Nalia stood behind the cooking hut, unseen. She had not spoken to him since the night of the fire. and he had not dared to look her in the eye. Now she moved after them. Careful. Silent. Keeping to the shadows, wrapped in a plain wrapper, the last of the salt ash mixture hidden in a small gourd strapped to her hip. Her breath was tight in her chest. Her legs ached with each step. But her eyes stayed fixed on the shape of her husband trailing behind Zara, like a man being led by a dream. They walked for hours. The forest thickened. The birds grew quiet. Even insects stilled. Zara's steps never faltered. She moved like she belonged to the path, like the vines parted for her, like the trees turned their faces when she passed. Jabari followed, hypnotized, his jaw slack, his eyes clouded. Nalia's heartbeat thudded with dread. She knew the old stories, about spirits who led men into the woods, never to return. About voices that sang sweetly just before the dying. But no tale had ever prepared her for this moment. Not one had warned her what love twisted into when it stopped being human. At last they stopped in a clearing where no sunlight reached, only a sickly bluish mist. A stone altar stood in the center, ancient, cracked, and covered in moss. Vines wrapped around it like fingers clutching bone. The air smelled of damp earth and something more, something metallic like old blood and decay. Zara turned. She looked at Jabari and smiled, not the gentle, mysterious smile he'd fallen for, but something wider. Hungrier. Her eyes no longer shimmered, they burned. Her skin began to ripple like silk caught in wind, and her shadow stretched unnaturally behind her, growing longer and taller than her body. Nalia crouched behind a thicket, breath frozen. Zara raised her arms. I brought you, she said to Jabari, to where the veil thins, where truth can no longer be dressed. And then before his eyes her form shifted. Her legs turned to shadow, long and black and formless. Her hands became clawed and bone-white, fingertips trailing mist. Her face, still beautiful, now flickered like a flame in broken glass. At moments she was Zara. At others she was something ancient and hollow, with deep eyeless sockets that drank in the light around her. Jabari gasped but didn't run. He was caught, trapped between wonder and fear. She moved toward him, slow and deliberate. You loved what you could not see, she whispered. He nodded once like a boy caught in prayer. Then she kissed him. It was not a kiss of warmth. It was not a kiss of love. It was a wound being pressed into a soul. His body stiffened immediately. Blood poured from his eyes, then his ears. His lips parted in a scream that never came. He collapsed to his knees, shivering violently. From the trees Nalia screamed. She broke from the brush, running barefoot into the clearing, the gourd in her hands. Zara turned, her mouth still stained with Jabari's blood, her face both woman and wraith. You were never the fire, Zara said. Only the smoke. Nalia didn't stop. She reached the altar and flung the contents of the gourd, salt, ash, grave dust, into Zara's chest. There was no cry. Just silence. Then the flames erupted. Black fire burst from Zara's body, engulfing her instantly. It roared without heat, spinning upward in a column that pulled the mist into itself. Her arms thrashed, her shadow coiled like a dying snake. Her face cracked, once, twice, and split like glass dropped from a roof. Then she was gone. No ash. No remains. Just the silence. The forest held its breath again. Nalia turned to Jabari. He lay on the forest floor, blood dried on his cheeks, eyes shut, chest barely rising. She dropped beside him, cradling his head in her lap. Jabari, she whispered. Please. Please wake up. His fingers twitched. Then nothing. Tears slid down her face as she looked up at the sky, barely visible through the thick canopy. She took everything, she whispered. But the wind stirred again. A bird called from a high branch. Somewhere in the woods a frog croaked. And Jabari breathed, shallow but steady. She closed her eyes. He was not dead. But the price of his love had been nearly everything. She pressed her forehead to his and whispered the old prayer, not for strength, not for revenge. For return. And for mercy. Jabari awoke on the fourth morning after the forest, blinking into the pale light that filtered through the cracks of the mud wall. His body felt like stone, heavy, aching, and hollow in ways that had no name. Nalia sat nearby on a stool, grinding herbs with a wooden pestle. She didn't look at him. She hadn't looked at him in days. He opened his mouth to speak, but only a croak came out. She rose wordlessly, poured water into a calabash, and held it to his lips. He drank greedily, wincing at the pain in his chest. What happened? He rasped. Where is she? Nalia placed the calabash down and returned to her stool. Her silence was harder than any slap. Jabari frowned. His memory came in pieces, sharp and confusing. Zara's laughter, the sound of wind in the forest, a kiss that burned like boiling oil. Then nothing. Just blackness. And now this strange stillness wrapped around him like mourning cloth. Outside, the compound was quiet. No children played near the fire pit. No neighbors passed by with greetings or warm laughter. The village had drawn back from them, suspicious, afraid, waiting to see what might rise from the ruins of what had been. A week ago he had walked through these paths proud, even arrogant, with Zara on his arm. Now he was a ghost of himself, barely able to sit up without trembling. Nalia brought him broth at sunset. She placed it by his mat but did not feed him. She no longer fussed. No longer asked if he was warm enough or if he needed more cloth for his head. She cared for him the way one cares for a stray, out of decency, not affection. "Why are you so quiet?" he asked her finally that night, voice low. She looked at him then, her eyes flat and distant. "Because silence is the only thing that hasn't betrayed me." Jabari flinched. "I don't remember," he whispered. "I truly don't." She nodded. "I know. That's what makes it worse." He lay back slowly, the broth untouched. The next day word came that Mama Dodo had asked for Nalia. She walked alone to the elder's hut, her heart weary but her spine straight. Inside, Mama Dodo stirred a pot of bitter leaf soup while herbs dried on cords above her. Her eyes, though clouded, still missed nothing. "She is gone?" Nalia asked. "Gone from this world," Mama Dodo said, "but not without leaving a shadow." Nalia sat down slowly. "He doesn't remember anything." "That is mercy," Mama Dodo said. "But also punishment. Sometimes forgetting is worse than truth." Why did she choose him? Because his heart was open, the old woman said. Not to her but to longing. Some spirits enter through open doors. Others crawl through cracks in weak walls. Zara found both. Nalia clenched her fists in her lap. "I did everything I could. I warned him. I showed him." Mama Dodo smiled faintly. "You did. And still he chose blindness. Now he must see with new eyes." They sat in silence a moment. "I burned everything," Nalia whispered. "The teeth. The cloth. All but the necklace." Mama Dodo's face turned sharply. "The necklace." Nalia's eyes narrowed. "It was gone when I came back. I searched the hut, the floor, even under the firewood. It disappeared." Mama Dodo exhaled slowly. "Then it still walks." Nalia stared. "What do you mean?" "Not Zara. Not the flesh. But the thread of her binding. Her mark. That necklace was her gate. Whoever holds it now, even unknowingly, holds a piece of her." Nalia felt her stomach twist. Could it be Jabari? "I don't know," Mama Dodo said. "But watch him. Watch the shadows he casts. And if the wind speaks his name at night, listen carefully. It may not be him speaking back." Back at the compound, Nalia sat beside her husband's mat and watched him sleep. He murmured something in his dreams, soft, unintelligible. His face twitched. She leaned closer and listened. What she heard chilled her to the bone. A word, barely audible, like a memory returning. "Zara?" She stood slowly, backed away from the mat, and stepped outside into the night air. The wind had shifted. And somewhere in the dark, something was listening. The afternoon was warm, and the soil beneath the old tree had softened after a night of rain. Asha, barefoot and humming, dug at the base of the gnarled trunk with a stick. She wasn't looking for anything in particular, just pretending to cook tree soup, the way she used to when Mama Zara had watched her with those shiny secret smile eyes. Her mother never let her play here anymore, but Nalia was inside, tending to Baba, who still slept more than he woke. So Asha played quietly, whispering to the leaves. That's when the stick hit something hard. She paused, frowning, and brushed the dirt away with her hand. A small flash of silver caught the light. Carefully she pulled it free. It was a necklace, cold even in the sun, a thin silver chain with a carved serpent curled around a dark red stone. Its eyes were tiny black dots, sharp and deep, like seeds from a fruit no one dared to eat. Asha smiled. She remembered it. The lady had worn it every day. Sometimes it peeked from under her wrapper, and Asha would stare at the way the snake shimmered like it was breathing. She'd asked to touch it once and the lady had said, "One day if you're very good." Now it was hers. But she didn't tell anyone. She ran to the back hut where her doll sat, threadbare and worn, one button eye missing, the other cracked. She'd once buried it after the lady told her to. Then Mama had made her dig it up again and scolded her for playing strange games. She unstitched the belly with her teeth, just a small tear. Then she slipped the necklace inside and pressed the stuffing back around it, patting it gently. The serpent was still cold inside the doll, but it didn't feel heavy. It felt like it belonged there. That night, the compound was quiet. Nalia sat on her mat, rubbing oil into Jabari's hands. He had begun speaking again, small words, sometimes confused, sometimes afraid. She hadn't told him Zara's name reappeared in his sleep. Outside, the crickets chirped. Somewhere an owl hooted. And Asha whispered. She sat up in bed, doll pressed to her chest, eyes wide in the dark. She came to me, she murmured. She smiled and said I did well. She looked at the doll. The lady says I can visit her, she whispered, stroking the doll's face. If I wear it? But only at night. Only when the moon forgets. She giggled softly, swinging her legs over the edge of the mat. In the silence, the air around her grew cool. And beneath her ribs, the serpent began to stir. The morning sun warmed the rooftops and danced on the cooking pots, and for the first time in weeks, Nalia allowed herself a moment of stillness. Jabari sat outside beneath the mango tree, quiet but alert, watching the birds. He had not spoken Zara's name in days. The fire in his eyes had returned, if only faintly. Asha played near the compound's edge, tracing circles in the dirt with a stick. She hummed as she worked, soft, sweet, and slightly off-key. Nalia's smile faded. It was a song she had hoped never to hear again. She stepped closer, trying not to startle her daughter. "What's that song you're humming, my child?" Asha paused. "It's just something I remember. The lady used to sing it when she brushed my hair. I like it." Nalia's hands clenched. "The lady is gone, Asha. That song is gone too." Asha tilted her head. "But she told me I could keep it." Nalia knelt quickly, holding her daughter's face in her hands. "Listen to me. If she ever speaks to you again, you tell me. Right away. Do you understand?" Asha nodded slowly, but her eyes were unreadable. That night, Nalia searched the girl's things. She found the doll near the bottom of the mat, tucked inside a clay bowl. It smelled faintly of ash. She turned it over, fingers running along its belly, and felt the uneven stitching. Her heart turned to stone. She unpicked the seam gently. There, inside the soft stuffing, curled like a secret, was the serpent necklace. Cold, untarnished, smiling. Nalia didn't scream. She simply stood, walked outside to the fire pit, and dropped the doll and necklace into the flames. But even as the wrapper blackened and the doll crumbled, the necklace took longer, too long. It hissed once before it melted, the serpent's face holding its shape far past the fire's natural reach. The next day, a cart rolled into the village. A new family had arrived from the southern plains, looking to settle before the next planting season. The wife was young, quiet, and strikingly beautiful. She greeted everyone with warmth, her voice soft and deliberate. She moved like silken wind. As Nalia watched her greet the elders, her stomach twisted. Around the woman's neck, just beneath her beaded shawl, gleamed a silver necklace, slender and old. A serpent, curled and elegant, its eyes black as coal. That night, as the village lights dimmed and the drums fell silent, Mama Dodo's voice came, like smoke rising from the earth. "The blood has been paid, but the debt moves. Spirits cannot die. They only change their names. And those who open their hearts too wide may again feed what should have starved." The wind shifted. And somewhere, under the roots of the old tree, the earth sighed.